first thing we have to do is make a box plot. Actually says to make a modified box plot. So automatically when it says modified box plot, you got to remember that that means that you need to do the calculations for outliers. Okay? So anytime you read the word modified, it means you got to do it with the calculations for outliers, if they exist, it says. All right, so I start by looking at the graph, and I'm like, all right, I need the 5-number summary, the min, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. So I need all those 5 numbers, which are all right there for me. The minimum, Q1, Q3, the median, and the maximum. And when I make my box plot, I got to do a scale as equally as I can all the way along. And I notice that my minimum value is 35. And then I got to go all the way up to 95. So 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70. Uh-oh. I'm going to run out of room here. Hold on just a second. All right, shrunk it down. 75, 80, 85, 90, 95. We'll pretend that I made it there on the end of my screen. So then I can start plugging in these numbers. So my minimum, it says, is 35. So I'm going to make a mark for 35. My Q1 is 68, which will be right about there. I've got my median is 76, so that's right about there. I got my Q3, which is 84, so this is 80, that's 90. So 84 is right about there, and then my maximum is 94, so just right there. So I've got this box, but I'm not going to draw my whiskers yet. And the reason why is I need to do my calculations for my outliers, which means I have to remember the formula. So what I first do is I need to first find IQR. All right, and IQR is equal to Q3 minus Q1. So that would be 84 minus 68, which is 16. All right, and then what I do is I then take 1.5 times the IQR. So 1.5 times 16 is 24. And then what I do is I then take, let's move my numbers up here a little bit. I then take the Q3 plus that number, which is 84 plus 24, 108. And then I look at my graph and I notice that this number is somewhere up here, beyond my upper value, which means then that I do not have an upper outlier, because my fence, that's what this number is here. This one, fence is not a word you have to remember, but that's just what I call it, because it's a boundary. So my boundary is beyond my maximum value, so I do not have any outliers at the top end. I also then have to take Q1, go back to blue, minus 24. So my Q1 again is 68, minus 24. Is 44. And so then I take that number and I notice, wait a second, right about there is 44. I already see that there's going to be a number less than that because that was my minimum. So I look up here in the problem, it also said the lowest grades were 35, 57, 59, and 60. Well, that means 35 is lower than 44. So this point down here is a potential outlier. So I'll make a little asterisk. All right. And now here's where people make mistakes, is they go, okay, and then they try to draw a line from the bottom of the box down to 44. But that would be a mistake because 44 is not a data point. It's a imaginary boundary line. Now, it could be in some data sets, it could be. But in this case, 44, I follow that along here, down to here, 44. That's just my fence. It's not an actual data point. So what I do is I go, okay, do I know the next number that's inside of the fence. And I do, it's 57. So at 57, right about there, I draw, well, that was kind of in a bad place, but it's a really tall line. 57, and then that becomes my end of my box plot. So now I have my box plot drawn. And people will ask, okay, so when I'm doing my test, what do I have to show? Everything that I have right here is what I would show to get full credit for what you're going to do. You know, so they say, so that means it's okay to have like these little dotted lines and arrows and the 44 and the 108? Absolutely. It shows, hey, look, I know how to make a modified box plot. I have a scale equally incremented, okay, except for up here, but just bear with me. All right. It doesn't say anything about explaining anything, but it does, well, it doesn't say show your work, but that's always implied. So I showed my work on how to make that box plot. Then for part B, it says write a brief description of what the results tell you about the distribution of the graphs, of the grades. All right, so as soon as you say that, you gotta be remembering those key words: shape, center, spread, and outliers. So for shape, I look at that box plot and I say, the box plot itself is roughly symmetric when you do not take into consideration the potential outlier. Boom, right there, I've already identified shape and outlier. All right, and then for center, I would say the box plot is centered at the median, which is 76, which means trust me, that word says which means half of the data is below 76 and half of the data is above 76. The distribution has an overall range of 60. Now remember, what I'm talking about here and what I'm saying in these explanations is I'm not writing it all down. You need to be writing all of this down, what I'm saying. So again, back to shape. Well, actually, you can go back, rewind what I said, and hear what I said about shape. Hear what I said about center. The range of the data is 60, which is from 95 to 35. The middle 50% is from 68 to 84, which has a interquartile range of 24. And as we've already identified, there is one potential outlier, which is the point 35, or the score of 35. So 35 is considerably lower score on this test than all of the rest of the scores on this test. And there's one more bullet point on there. It says, any significance in the difference between the mean and the median? Hopefully, you would look at this and realize, wow, this one data point down here is very different than the rest. That one data point, that one really low score, will have an effect on the mean. And if you look at it, you actually see that the mean itself is 74, which is right here. There's 74. All right, so the mean is less than the median, and that's because of this outlier. It's pulling the mean lower than the median. It's skewing the mean lower than the median. And the reason why, again, is because the mean is not resistant. So what I would say is, we can see that the mean, 74.71, is less than the median of 76. This is likely due in large part to the potential outlier of 35 because the mean is not resistant. It cannot withstand, this is my parenthetical, my little note to you, it cannot stand the significant change of 35, and that's why the mean gets skewed. Is that a lot to say? Yes. Is this your first test? Yes. But I'm hoping that having gone through this, you're getting a sense for what the expectations are, and as we go along here. All right. So if, say, for example, you only talked about shape and center, but didn't talk about spread and outliers, the best you're going to get for part B is a P, which is partial credit. E is essentially correct, P is partially correct, and I is incorrect. If you clearly identify the shape, but then don't talk about anything else, you'll still get an I for incomplete because it's just not enough. All right? You need to make sure that you're addressing all four of those. Mr. Stefan, but didn't we already talk about outliers? Well, you constructed outliers in A, but you didn't say anything about the outliers. And again, remember, whenever you're talking about something, if there is a number to reference it, tell what that number actually is as well. It adds weight, adds evidence to what you're trying to say. All right, folks, that's it for now. I'll see you on test day.